The senator from New Hampshire.
Madam President, I come to the floor today to oppose H.R. 23. This is a bill that levels unprecedented mandatory sanctions on the International Criminal Court, the ICC. I understand my colleagues' concerns about whether the court has jurisdiction over Israel, and I share those. I agree the court should not focus its resources investigating U.S. service members. I can't believe anybody in this chamber wants to see that. But the way this bill is drafted, sanctioning the ICC will not get them to withdraw the arrest warrants for Israeli officials. It could actually have the opposite effect, hardening the court's position. These sweeping sanctions we are about to consider are an incredibly powerful tool, and making this an issue that frankly goes beyond Israel and the United States and stretching around the world is not going to be helpful to our national security. These sanctions will make it almost impossible for the United States to engage the court on other issues in our national interest, whether that's prosecuting the atrocities in Sudan, or human rights abuses by the Taliban, or in Venezuela, or Russia's war crimes against Ukraine. This bill would target the civil servants who work at the ICC, and not just them, it would target their families. Lower-level workers who provide administrative, paralegal, research, even catering and sanitary services would be affected. It could target their family members just for being related. The bill could also potentially target subsidiaries of major U.S. companies like Microsoft for providing technical services to the ICC, which they may have been performing for a number of years before this bill was passed. And the way it's worded, it's retroactive, it would affect them. Not only that, but this bill targets some of the United States' most important allies. For example, the host country for the ICC, the Netherlands, as well as the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan, who are the ICC's biggest donors. And it also includes the citizens of those companies who work at the ICC. These alliances are one of America's greatest assets. They make us stronger and safer. And this bill could do real damage to these relationships. It could undermine vital multilateral organizations and hurt U.S. strategic interests. So, Madam President, I was hoping that we could come to an agreement. We've been negotiating with Senator Cotton, who's the author of this bill. I know we share most of the same concerns that he does in drafting the bill, but I think it's overly broad. It's not drafted in a way that addresses what I think are the unique concerns that we have with respect to the International Criminal Court. So, sadly, since we have not been able to come to an agreement to address those concerns, I intend to vote no on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to do the same on the motion to proceed. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Arkansas.
I ask unanimous consent that the mandatory quorum call with respect to the motion to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed to calendar item number 3, H.R. 23, be waived.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent to be able to complete my remarks before the scheduled vote.
Without objection.
Madam President, the so-called International Criminal Court is a major threat to America's sovereignty and our troops. That threat was clear from the court's founding in 2002, 23 years ago. It's why the United States never agreed to its jurisdiction. It's why, in the same year, Congress passed the American Service Members Protection Act, also colloquially known as the Hague Invasion Act, a law which authorizes the President to use all means necessary to release our citizens detained by the court. 23 years is a long time, but we still have some senators in the chamber who voted for that bill, including none other than the Democratic leader, Senator Schumer. Senator Wyden also voted for it. But even that hasn't stopped The Hague from targeting Americans. Under President Obama, the court threatened to investigate American soldiers in Afghanistan. It did so again in 2020 under President Trump. To this very day, the ICC has an open investigation into U.S. troops who risked their lives to fight against terrorism. To be clear, the United States is not and will never be a member of the International Criminal Court. Yet this kangaroo court continues threatening to haul our citizens in front of foreign judges, judges who have no jurisdiction over our Americans and who do not follow basic rules of due process provided for by our Constitution. The State of Israel is another non-party to the court in The Hague, where anti-Semitism is regrettably alive and well. Although Israel has never consented to the court's judgment, the ICC issued arrest warrants for the leader of Israel and its former defense minister last November. By asserting jurisdiction over a non-member, the ICC has grossly violated the Rome Statute, the treaty that created the court. The court also broke its own rules against prosecuting individuals under governments with functioning criminal justice systems, like Israel. I also would note that the court has not issued arrest warrants for flagrant human rights abusers like, I don't know, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, former Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, or the genocidal president of China, Xi Jinping. The court seems to prefer targeting democratically elected leaders instead of terrorists and despots. It's no secret that the court's targeting of Israel is a trial run to go after Americans. If they succeed against Israel, America will be next. That's why Congress must guarantee any acts of aggression by this court against our citizens and our friends will be met with a swift response. Our illegitimate Court Counteraction Act would sanction ICC officials involved in prosecuting any American, Israeli, or other allied citizen wrongfully targeted by the court. It would also revoke their visas. This act is a targeted and justified response to the constant threats of this court against our troops and our allies. That's why more than half of Americans said they would support sanctioning this court. It's also why every House Republican and 45 House Democrats voted for the bill earlier this month. Now, despite this broad bipartisan and public support, some of my Democratic colleagues still have concerns. So let me put their minds at ease. First, some have called the sanctions in this bill, quote, draconian. Far from draconian, these same property and visa restrictions were used by the Obama and Biden administration not once, not twice, but 49 times. Others have said the bill could target our allies. The bill, however, clearly is directed at foreign persons, not foreign nations. Okay, but still others have said the ICC bill targets, quote, citizens of our allies. Yes, if you are involved in illegitimately targeting Americans, you could face sanctions. This bill does not, once again, sanction foreign nations like the United Kingdom. But if British nationals at the court are targeting American citizens, you better believe they could face sanctions. Still others say it would undermine our alliances. Yet again, the bill only targets officials directly involved in action against the United States and our allies, not foreign nations. Furthermore, if passed as prologue, all of our allies will stick with the United States. When Congress passed the Hague Invasion Act in 2002 with Senator Schumer's vote, all of those nations entered agreements with us to continue their relationship with us, not with the court. Still others say that this would target foreign subsidiaries of American companies. I have worked with Senator Shaheen in good faith, and I commend her for her work with me on that over the last few days. It seems to have become clear, though, that these American subsidiaries don't want a narrow carve-out. They want a massive carve-out that would, in fact, allow them to continue in the future, say, providing information about American troops' actions in Afghanistan, which we do not think they should have. Again, every Republican in the House voted for this. 45 Democrats in the House voted for it. 2 Democratic senators who were in the House last year voted for it. Last April, I led several of my colleagues in a letter to the court's prosecutor, Karim Khan. The letter warned him against issuing arrest warrants to target Israeli leaders. We said, if you target Israel, we will target you. Despite this clear warning, he proceeded anyway, a gross insult to our friends in Israel and an even more dangerous threat in the future to American sovereignty. He and his court should now face the consequences, and I urge all of my colleagues to vote on this motion so we can continue debate on this critical legislation.
Madam President.
The Democratic leader.
Thank you, Madam President. Now, Madam President, I have spent decades watching the International Criminal Court with a critical eye. From the beginning, even when I was in Congress, I was certain that the ICC would display the same anti-Israel bias that permeated the UN and other international organizations. Unfortunately, I believe subsequent years have proven me correct. While the ICC has undeniably done some good work, including going after President Putin and addressing atrocities in Darfur, their anti-Israel bias has taken over and become too much to ignore. Last May, 7 months after Hamas's horrific attack on Israel, the ICC made a shocking announcement. Instead of going after terrorist organizations who ordered the murder, rape, and abduction of innocent Israelis, the ICC's prosecutor chose to equate those ungodly actions with the justifiable response of the Israeli government. I know that's hard to comprehend, so I'll say it again. Last May, the ICC equated the Hamas terrorist organization with the Israeli government, betraying an anti-Israel bias that cannot be ignored, a bias that is deeply rooted, sinister, and which fuels the anti-Semitism resurging across the globe, including here in America, the country I love. It's hard for me to comprehend even today. And that false equivalence, I believe, is the reason we are here on the Senate floor considering an ICC sanctions bill. The ICC bill is one I largely support and would like to see become law. However, as much as I oppose the ICC's deep bias against Israel, and as much as I want to see that institution drastically reformed and reshaped, the bill before us is poorly drafted and deeply problematic. It'll have many unintended consequences that undermine its primary goal. The bill as drafted would enable sanctions against American companies who have contracts to support the ICC's technology functions. These American companies do not make investigative or prosecutorial decisions. These American companies' employees do not recommend nor bring cases. These American companies do not demonstrate the same anti-Semitic bias that the ICC does. But the work of those companies does defend the ICC's computer network against Russian hackers who would like to expose witnesses who have shared information about Russian atrocities. A small fix could have been made to protect the work of those companies, but the Republican majority refused to make such a fix. The bill as drafted would also allow President Trump to arbitrarily sanction the heads of state of our allies. They all called and complained about that part because their countries are members of the ICC. During this time of world tumult, that's an unnecessary burden to place on our allies. By sanctioning our allies, this bill as drafted would hamstring the ICC's ability to go after Putin for his war crimes, giving him the best gift possible. Again, a small fix, which Senator Shaheen tried to get, would easily have addressed this concern. These fixes could have easily been made, and Lord knows Senator Shaheen tried to fix them. You see, once Leader Thune brought this to the floor, I asked Senator Shaheen, the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to try to work with our Republican colleagues to address some of the drafting errors, not changing in any way the way the ICC should be taken to task for the way they go after Israel, but these other changes unrelated to Israel. She and her staff worked tirelessly to find a way forward. But the Republican majority, the senator from Arkansas, refused to make these simple changes. Therefore, because they have chosen this partisan, non-consultative path, I will oppose the cloture on the motion to proceed, with the fervent hope that the other side will realize their error and their careless drafting and resume real conversations with us. A bipartisan agreement is still very possible, and we hope and urge our Republican colleagues to sit down with us and come up with a bill that addresses the very real problems at the ICC without adversely affecting American companies and our allies. And I ask for the yeas and nays. Go ahead.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke culture.